What's the most ducked up thing someone has told you about themselves after barely getting to know them? I sat next to this quiet kid in my Spanish class. He was awkward and had a subtle speech impediment. One day, I tried to spark conversation with him, and he told me that he considered murdering his parents. Guess he really did not want to talk with you. Worked. Guess that's one way to get someone to stop talking to you. Lol. I was seated next to a quiet kid on a high school band bus to a football game. He'd been in my band class for years, but I had never really spoken to him. He was the type who didn't fit into anything at school that I ever saw. I resolved to get to know him a bit and open up a conversation, since we were going to be sitting by each other for a few hours. It was like a dam burst. That dude talked for the whole trip. At one point, he told me that his mom was really unhappy with his stepdad, but couldn't afford to divorce him. And then he told me that his stepdad would get drunk and beat him with a stick, but he wasn't sure if his mom was also getting beaten, and that scared him. There was a brief pause before he said, "I never told anyone that before." Then he changed the subject completely. I must have been 17 or so. It shook me. Obviously I was old enough to know that sort of thing happens, but too sheltered to think it happened to anyone I knew. I told my parents about it. Seemed the right thing to do. I don't know what happened from there. He and I never really spoke of it again. I just looked him up on Facebook, though. Looks like he's done really well for himself. I'm sure he appreciated your kindness. Happy that he is doing well for himself. Coworker took out a client for a business lunch at a small town restaurant. He asks the waitress, "How are you?" to be polite. She proceeds to go on a 5-minute spiel about how terrible her ex-husband is, and how he's ruining her life, and how she feels like crap because of it. After she finishes, takes their order and leaves, the customer says, "So you must know her pretty well." Only well enough to say hi in passing. Oh, so then that was just as awkward for you as it was for me then? Yes it was. This feels like a Parks and Rec scene. Like it a lot. Alternatively, that waitress is 100% Twiller from Schitt's Creek. I was doing my practice in a hospital. They brought a young man in the neuro clinic. He was my first patient. He was around 30, and he had fallen from a tree while working. He turned out to have a complicated neurological condition that had nothing to do with his fall. He was also diagnosed with severe depression. He was in there for months and no one ever visited him. The only time he felt a bit better was when I visited him and did some tests to him. He said, "It's nice when you come and make me play with the colored toys and make me draw things." One day he was looking out of the window. When I came in, he looked me dead in the eye and told me, if the windows didn't have protective bars, I'd jump right out. It was the first time I'd heard such thing, and I remember it ever since. It's truly horrible how many people with neurological disabilities or mental disabilities just get abandoned as soon as the family can get away with it. I used to work at an animal shelter, and we had several people who would come volunteer to help out. One of the women who came there on a regular basis went to lunch with me. She was such a sweet woman, a little older than I was at the time. She proceeded to tell me that she used to go to the park and give old men blowjobs because she felt sorry for them. WTF. That is too weird. What animal shelter? What park? For research purposes, of course. Some guy next to me on the bus once went into a long elaborate story about how he burned his house down for insurance money like 3 weeks prior. I wouldn't have believed it if his hands didn't have massive burn scarring. Lol, dude probably just had scared hands and makes up a new story whenever someone stares at them. Used to ride the bus every day to get to one of my first jobs. Old dude on it had a removable section of his face. I probably heard about 30 different versions of how it happened when he caught kids staring. Oh, you look nervous. Is it the scars? Do you wanna know how I got M? Come here, look at me. See, I had a wife, beautiful, like you, who tells me I worry too much, who tells me I ought to smile more, who gambles and gets in deep with the sharks. Hey. One day they carve her face. We have no money for surgeries. She can't take it. I just want to see her smile again, HMN. I just want her to know that I don't care about the scars. So I stick a razor in my mouth and do this to myself. And you know what? She can't stand the sight of me. She leaves. Now, I see the funny side. Now, I'm always smiling. I was temping at an office and the trainer told me about her ex. He was cheating on me, not just with one woman, but many different women. That's terrible, I replied, thinking we'd move on. Nope. No, it was worse than that. He filmed himself shagging the women, and then streamed a compilation of his conquests onto our TV, for me to watch. I was unsure of what to say, and after a couple of minutes of me being quiet she then said. When it was Valentine's Day a few days later, he gave me a present. He let me start unwrapping the present. In Pass the Parcel style, each layer had a used condom that he'd used to shag the women in his compilation video. To say I was sad there not knowing what the duck to say is an understatement. I'm just sitting here thinking, why would one keep unwrapping that present after the first layer? Worked with a new girl one night, literally didn't know her name. She told me about every sexual experience of her life, that she wanted to try anal, but kept having flashbacks to her uncle raping her, how her mom would invite guys over for a train when she was a teen, and a shit ton more. Bonus point, she turned me into ours because she told her fiance that she told me all this. He freaked out, so she lied and told them I harassed her. What was the outcome from ours? 2-week paid suspension while they investigated, after which I returned to work and she was no longer allowed to work in my department. I picked up a hitchhiker once that told me he left California after his wife died because the cops were asking too many questions. I dropped him off in the next town and he paid me with a beer and we parted way. Was his name Russell? Well, that night I lost myself to ruby red lips, milky white skin and baby blue eyes. A lap dance is so much better when the stripper is crying. Had to do a course and the trainer arrives, introduced himself to the small class of maybe 4 to 5 people, and asked a bit about each of us. He then told us his wife had died 2 years ago, and he tried to kill himself. I felt horrible for him, but he seemed genuinely happy with where his life was. I ended up staying back after class and having a beer with him at the bar. He was a really cool guy. I hope he is still happy. Sometimes telling people about the horrible shit you went through or are going through helps them understand where you are at in life. A coworker implied there was illegal activity going on among the hospital staff. It was my first day. During the training period at a new call center gig, one of my new coworkers got on the subject of how she'd done time for 5th-degree assault, and the amount of time she spent in jail was because the prosecutor had it out for her. Without thinking, I have no filter, I blurted out, "There's no way you get that kind of sentence for that without priors." Coworker's response, sounding defeated. Yeah. Randomly met a fellow motorcycler at a gas station at 2 AM. Told me he was going to confront his wife and her lover. Not right then, just in general. Then we rode the last 100 miles to St. Louis because he happened to be going the same way. I hope you didn't keep going on your way to his wife's house. Met a woman who worked child care. She told me all about how difficult it was working with abused boys, and how she got too close to one and had sexual feelings. Showed me a picture and said anyone who meets him thinks he is really nice and not to judge him on looks. Then the barman came back with my drink and I left. That was the entirety of conversation with a very drunk and probably shitty social worker. Yeah, that really sounds like pedo talk right there. That woman should not be allowed to be around children, much less vulnerable ones. You ever get that when someone clearly wants to say something, but has nobody to talk to? She was drunk enough, and I was standing beside her long enough for her to vent. Honestly, one of the strangest experiences I ever had, and I have absolutely zero thought it was a wind up. Just started a new job, said good morning to a lad there. His reply, I've just found out my lass has been getting back scuttled behind my back. I didn't even know his name. Back scuttled lol. Whatever your language is, it's awesome. It's English, it's just slang for doggy style northeast England where I'm from. I met a man at an airport once. I was there on layover, so I had some time to kill. I bought a book from the bookstore and went and sat at what my gate was supposed to be. I was 21 at the time maybe. It was kind of crowded and there was a man in his 40s sitting next to me. We chatted for a bit. I was just entering a program for my PTSD. I can't remember how the conversation got started. But we ended up talking about mental illness, life, rebuilding after said trauma, and how sometimes we inactively choose, or actively choose to remain in terrible situations. He mentioned to me how he was repeatedly molested from ages 8 to 13 by his Catholic priest. When his parents found out, his dad beat the priest until he had to be hospitalized. The mom and him ended up moving with the other siblings to a new state. And how he didn't recognize for over 10 years that his extremely rebellious teenage years, his drug use, his drugged up relationships, was because he was not processing the past. He gave me a great bit of advice that I ended up using. Sometimes what you really need is a change of scenery. He talked about how in his mid-20s he got therapy, and once therapy ended he moved. He packed what little he had and moved. Worked 2 jobs to put himself through college. Now on a few businesses. It is much happier and successful in his life. He made it a point to tell me that if you run from your problems they'll always catch you. However, if you confront your problems you're then free to go wherever you want. That was almost 10 years ago. And it made me really stick through therapy. And I took his advice and I moved. It was amazing. For a long while it was just what I needed. Unfortunately, isolation is putting me back into a pre-therapy mindset. And not to healthy. And I'm going back for more mental health work. But I still think of that layover I had at O'Hare Airport. Not technically the question, but my mother was an avid oversharer. It wasn't until I was older that I started to realize just how uncomfortable she would make people. There's a lot of stuff she would pass off as normal or even joke about that was really weird. The first time I met a friend in person from online, she spent the entire time telling his mom about how I was maybe sexually assaulted, but she wasn't sure, and then about her own sexual experiences. Within a week of moving here, my husband had learned about her abortions, how she lost her virginity, how I was probably harmed as a kid but who knows, about my fucking brother's sex life, about how he's not having good sex with his wife, and so many more things that he really didn't need to know. Edit. Thank you all so much. Met an old friend's girlfriend one day. Well, he was hardly a friend and more of like a friend of a friend. We hung out one day, his girlfriend was with us. First time meeting her, and that night she randomly sent me nudes and said that her boyfriend wanted to have a threesome with her and myself. I kindly declined. If they ask me today, I'd hop on that faster than a frog onto a lily pad. I love the way you included your current stance on the subject as well in the story. For that, I enjoy this answer the most on this thread. I met a guy who was delighted to tell me he was a convicted pedophile. I had to go to a bail hostel for guys just out of prison because, ironically, it had been burgled. He was in the lounge and said hello. Even when I was a CSI in law enforcement, I like to be pleasant. Big mistake, he took it as an invitation to talk. Anyway, this is the short version, because I was stuck in there with him for a good 20 minutes. You wouldn't talk to me if you knew why I was inside. Said like a 10-year-old with a brilliant secret. It was awful. Whatever. then repeat in various ways for a few minutes as he tried desperately to get me to ask what he had done. I had sex with my 2 granddaughters. Ooh, okay, I. Yes. I had sex with them. See? I told you that you wouldn't like what I'd done. They were 6 and 8 inches. Let's be clear. You raped them. You didn't have sex with them. But I did the right thing because I confessed rather than making them give evidence. At this point I fancied the idea of sending him out the window, but resisted the temptation. Pedophiles have nothing left apart from memories and the idea that their stories bring some sort of status. The stories are currency, so I wasn't going to let him think he was special. And exit. I still think of him. I like to imagine he died in pain, with nobody by his side. Apparently I have a face that says confess your darkest secrets to me. In high school I had a lab partner start off by saying she's in a new foster home and she'll be a great partner cause they basically let her do her own thing, so she'll always be available to study. Not knowing where this would go I asked if that was different than her previous home. What I got in response was just an avalanche of horror, including at least this place didn't watch me shower. Only thing I could think of after was to ask if she was okay. Do I need to say something to someone? She did turn out to be an excellent lab partner though. In college I had 2 girls tell me about their sexual assaults pretty close to meeting them. Those threw me for a loop, and I had to ask my female friends, is there something I throwing out there that say I'm dangerous? They all said it's the opposite, I make people feel comfortable. Had a coworker ask me to help her submit something to a radio station contest. I got to the part about her formerly working in porn and escorting cause her daughter needed to eat. Had to tap out on that and suggested maybe she just come over and borrow my computer and submit this herself. I feel this on a spiritual level. I too have the therapist face. Not sure if this is ducked up. Definitely nowhere near what I have read on this thread already. Met this dude in college when he moved into the dorm. Goofy looking redneck kid from the San Antonio area. I'm getting to know him when I noticed his Spice Girls CD. This was like 2003 and I commented on it. He then goes into this long story of how he was at the Walmart in San Antonio looking at the CDs in that store and just happened to have bumped into Ginger Spice, who invited his underage ass into the tour bus that no one had noticed, and he lost his virginity to all the Spice Girls at once. My thought was, thank you for this story. I know instantly that I can never trust or believe anything you ever tell me again. It's been almost 20 years and I still can't believe that was something he said in the first 5 minutes of meeting me. Back quote, if you want Abe my lover, you gotta get with my friends. My wife loves to tell this story. Her first day at a new company, she was to meet another employee who would show her around the office. She met her in the lobby, and on the elevator ride up to the office she proceeded to tell my wife how her husband has gained some weight and she is considering starting an office affair with a co-worker who is really into fitness and has muscles. Apparently she made a gesture where she fanned herself while saying muscles. Like literally, my wife met this lady 5 minutes earlier for the first time in the lobby and she is already unloading all this stuff on her. What's with unloading on new coworkers? I started a new job once, and my boss's boss took me out to lunch to get to know me better, and ended up telling me all about how he's the black sheep of his family and all the ways he had disappointed his parents. It was really weird. My boss at the time had hired an older woman who was re-entering the workforce. He wanted to fire her the first day when she couldn't even complete the legal paperwork, maybe 20 minutes for the slowest readers, in 8 hours. He quickly lost his patience training her, so he pawned her off on me. Before the end of the first day I trained her, she failed at things as I explained them to her, cried, called me a bully for trying to train her too quickly. She reported me to the boss and she wanted to report me to ours for creating a hostile environment. I was actually out of town at the time, but he managed to spook her enough by asking if we should just call this hiring a mistake and have her and the company mutually part ways. She straightened up pretty quick apparently. When I came back a few days later she's better and more eager to learn. As we are leaving for the day her husband is waiting for her in the parking lot with her teenage son in the back seat. I pull out in my car after they do, and the entire time her son is turned around in the back seat smiling at me through the rear windshield. The following day she tells me her son has a huge crush on me now. He thinks I'm so hot, and he's going along for the ride tonight, so he can see me again. Then this woman, who I have known for 3 days, tells me all of her teenage minor child's physical stats including the size of his penis. While mother knows the size of her son's penis, I do not wish to know. I actually had to remind this woman that I was more than a decade older than her minor child. To which she sort of laughed and said he'd be older soon enough. She did not end up working with us for long. I do a birthday gangbang every year, you can come if you want. Bring your friends if they are like you or have big dongs. Knew her for 8 hours maximum. Edit. 1. My penis was never talked about before or after. 2. I've been in a relationship for 5 years. 3. Not interested in the group sex scene regardless. 4. Not one of those hell yeah man I love sluts type dudes. This never would have been me. Sorry, it seems like a golden ticket for so many of you lol.